Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's just jump right into it. Today, we're tackling something that plagues literally almost all of us. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's that moment your brain, with all of its incredible evolutionary brilliance, decides to act like a broken record player. It just starts blasting the same 15 seconds of, say, the Meow Mix theme song, or some dangerously catchy pop song, while you're just trying to take your morning shower in peace. We are diving into the weird science of the earworm and figuring out why our brains seem to purposely convince us that a terrible song is stuck in our heads.
I mean, we have absolutely all been there. You're staring blankly into the middle distance, and a toothpaste commercial jingle or a random snippet of Lady Gaga is just looping endlessly in your mind, and you're just standing there wondering, why? Why does my own brain choose to torture me this way? It honestly feels like an uninvited mental DJ has completely hijacked your internal sound system, and they are ignoring your desperate pleas to change the track. But as we're going to see today, this isn't some weird glitch in your hardware. It's actually a deeply ingrained cognitive feature.
Now, if you feel like a completely helpless victim of your own mind right now, take a little comfort in this. You definitely aren't alone. Well over 90% of people suffer from these mental hijackings at least once a week. And let's be honest, for a lot of us, it's a daily struggle. Misery loves company, right? It really doesn't matter if you're a classically trained musician or someone who couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. Your brain is just highly susceptible to getting a song stuck on repeat.
So officially, the fancy scientific term for an earworm is Involuntary Musical Imagery, or INMI. But let's be real, we know it best as that cognitive itch we just can't seem to scratch. And unlike when you deliberately try to remember a song, which is a controlled, voluntary thing, INMI just shows up completely uninvited. It behaves a lot more like an intrusive thought than a normal memory, totally resisting every single attempt you make to dismiss it.
Okay, let's move on to section 1, inside the phonological loop.
So, located right there in your auditory cortex, the phonological loop is basically a short length of mental recording tape. Its whole job is to continuously store a tiny amount of auditory information. Basically, think of it like a jammed cassette tape that stores just enough audio, say a punchy 15-second chorus, to drive you completely insane. It's an evolutionary system that was originally meant to remember important patterns, but catchy music essentially hacks right into it.
Which begs the question, what actually makes a song stick? Well, pop stars and jingle writers are pretty much exploiting our neurobiology. Research shows that earworms typically have a faster tempo than average and a common melodic contour, which just means the pitch rises and then falls in a really predictable way. But then, crucially, they throw in an unusual interval or an unexpected leap. So they're predictable enough for your brain to loop easily, but just surprising enough to totally snag your attention.
But hey, earworms aren't all bad news. There's actually a wild story where a neurologist diagnosed a super rare condition, Wilson's disease, all because of an annoying looping earworm. He had the Jackie Wilson song Because of You stuck in his head all morning. And while he was examining a patient with a tremor, that Jackie Wilson earworm subconsciously reminded him to look for this very specific brown ring, a Kayser-Fleischer ring, in the patient's eye, which totally confirmed the diagnosis. So, sometimes your mental DJ is actually trying to help you do your job.
Right, moving on to section 2, the unfinished business trap.
The big culprit here is something psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect. Discovered way back in the 1920s, this principle basically says that your brain maintains cognitive tension around uncompleted tasks. Simply put, your brain absolutely hates an unresolved cliffhanger. So when you hear just a tiny fragment of a chorus passing by in the grocery store, your brain receives an incomplete musical phrase. Because it's unfinished, your auditory cortex just loops it endlessly, desperately trying to finish the puzzle and find some resolution. Your brain is quite literally holding you hostage over a Taylor Swift bridge.
And you probably notice this usually happens when you zone out, right? When your prefrontal cortex is engaged in a really hard task, you're fine. But the very second your brain idles on autopilot, like when you're showering or commuting, your default mode network, or DMN, takes over. The DMN loves to fill silence, and spontaneous music loops are pretty much its favorite filler. The moment you let your guard down, bam, the mental DJ starts spinning tracks.
Which brings us to section 3, bedtime sabotage. There was this fascinating study out of Baylor University that proved earworms literally ruin our sleep. They actually show up on EEG graphs as increased frontal slow oscillation activity. Now that's a classic signature of memory consolidation. It proves that even when you are entirely unconscious, your brain is just steadily working away, processing musical melodies. Your brain is essentially doing homework on that catchy pop song while you are just desperately trying to get your 8 hours.
Now,
You might be thinking, okay, I'll just wind down with some peaceful instrumental music. That's got to be safer than lyrical pop songs, right? Surprisingly, it's actually way worse. The study found that listening to instrumental bedtime music almost doubles your chances of getting a sleep-wrecking earworm. It jumps from a 28% risk with lyrics to a whopping 52% risk with instrumental tracks. Who would have guessed?
And the sabotage goes so deep that roughly a quarter of people, 25%, wake up with a song already playing in their head. Just think about that for a second. They haven't heard music in 8 hours, there is zero external trigger, no alarm clock radio playing, yet the brain just boots up in the morning and immediately drops a beat. It is literally the world's worst morning alarm, completely unprompted.
All right, let's get into Section 4, How to Evict an Earworm.
Thankfully, science has actually given us a few proven, if slightly weird, lab-tested tricks to fix this. First, chew gum. Second, listen to the entire song. Because of that Zeigarnik effect we just talked about, hearing the song to the very end provides closure, and it finally lets your brain just let it go. And third, do a moderately challenging puzzle, like a Sudoku, to engage your working memory and distract that default mode network.
I honestly love the gum chewing trick because it's so hilarious, but it totally works because of something called articulatory motor interference. It physically jams up the jaw and tongue motor pathways that your brain needs to subconsciously sing along. So just by aggressively chewing some gum, you essentially hijack the exact motor circuits your brain is using to torture you.
So with these lab-tested tricks, from solving puzzles to aggressively chewing a stick of gum, you can finally reclaim your sanity. Your brain isn't broken, I promise. It's just an incredibly efficient pattern recognition machine that occasionally gets stuck on a loop of Baby Shark. But as we wrap up this explainer, I do have to leave you with one final, kind of haunting thought. What terrible song is your brain going to randomly torture you with tonight? Good luck out there, and thanks for joining me.